Good morning. This is Rose Minton, and I'm the moderator of your session this morning. We'd like to welcome you to the webinar sponsored by the 311 Synergy Group and also ICMA, which is our research partner. We're doing today a recap of the meeting that we had in May of this year, and I'll introduce the topics and the panelists in just a minute. But first, I'd like to talk a little bit about the 311 Synergy Group. We are an industry networking group. We get together for a conference once a year to do information sharing, provide educational presentations, talk with each other, share information, have a little fun when we're at the conference. We also interact with each other throughout the year through these webinars and also at our site on LinkedIn. So our next meeting, which we're already planning for, is in Tampa, and it'll be at the end of April, and we're really excited. We've already started building that agenda and reaching out to our sponsors, and we'd love for those of you that are on the call today to start making your plans and budgeting to join us there. The recap of the meeting today, it was kind of difficult to put this together because we had so many great topics that were presented this year. This year's conference was our best attended. We had over 60 attendees. It was our best sponsored conference with 7 wonderful sponsors, some of which are represented here today. So it gave us a lot of energy to begin the planning for next year. We had a lot of positive feedback from the participants, ideas about topics, and so we're very interested in getting started with that planning. The webinars are an important part of what we've been doing as part of the 311 Synergy Group, and we're going to change the format a little bit this year. Instead of having topics that we present to you, we're going to open it up into best practices webinars. I'll be moderating, assisted by Esther Tannenbaum, and she'll be helping moderate those best practices interactive sessions. So it's information sharing like we do as part of the meetings. And just a little bit of logistics before I introduce the panelists. We are going to be presenting for 10 minutes and moving from one panelist to the other. We'll be asking you to record any questions that you might have. On your screen, you can see at the bottom right-hand corner, there's a Q&A section. If you'll use that Q&A section to write your questions, then I'll moderate the question and answer session today at the end. And also, I know you'll all be interested in the slides that we have today. You'll find those slides posted at our 311 Synergy Group LinkedIn site. So if you haven't joined the 311 Synergy Group on LinkedIn, it is a site for municipal 311 leaders and thought leaders, and we'd invite you to go on to LinkedIn and send a request, and we'll get that approved, and you'll have access to all this information. So I'd like to just review today the topics that we'll be covering. We'll be going through open data and transparency, Andy Maimoni from the City and County of San Francisco. Also we'll be covering, I'm sorry, it keeps popping. We'll be covering with Lag and Steve Carter. He'll be covering social listening and engagement for 311 contact centers. The City of Toronto, represented by Neil and Heather, they'll be covering knowledge base. Oracle was planning on presenting today, and they're having a little bit of technical difficulty. I know they're troubleshooting that, so we look forward to hearing from them if they can actually dial in. And then Eva Liggins, one of our past chairpersons from the 311 Synergy Group, she'll be presenting customer service across multiple industries. I'd like to also acknowledge one of our sponsors, AT&T. They had planned to present, and a last-minute conflict prevented them from doing that. So we appreciate the sponsorship of AT&T, and we're sorry that they weren't able to attend today. So we have a lot of great information to cover. What I'll do now is turn this over to Andy Maimoni. And again, please write your questions, and we'll be addressing the questions at the end of the webinar. Andy?
Hi, great. Thanks, Rose, for the introduction, and thanks everybody for taking your time, this morning to join us. We're excited to be able to give you a look into our previous meeting and really encourage you to participate in the upcoming year at the upcoming best practice webinars, and really look at that time coming up in April for two reasons. One, block out that time and make that trip down to Florida. And as Rose said, we're already as Rose said, we are working on planning that session, and if there are things that you see emerging as something that you really need to know about, then get that feedback to us, and we'd love to have the help of getting a meeting that really meets your needs. So the first thing we're going to talk about today is open data and using open data to help make decisions. We see in San Francisco the concept of open data as being really central to doing work for the public. 311 is really at the center of the public, decision makers, and the departments, and it's key that we do have that interaction and provide that information back out. So how many times do you get this freedom of information request? You sit there and you look at it and you go, gosh, now what do I do with this request? And it's not hard. I mean, you probably have access to the data, but whenever you get one of these requests, you just kind of stop and think about, how am I going to handle this request? I mean, in San Francisco, we get about 22,000 phone calls a month. We get 13 million calls overall. We've got a way of tracking them, but it seems like every time we get one of these requests, we stumble over it. And maybe there's a better way of doing it. How often do you get these requests, and what's the overhead cost of handling a freedom of information request? So it brings the question to mind of, maybe we just make the data public, right? Well, if I want to make the data public, how much staff do I need? And then how do I share the data? And we're going to talk about those items a little bit. The business drivers for sharing, and then how do you make it happen? So again, going into the why of all of it, I mean, the why really is the key part to it. Open government is facilitated by data. If we want people to be involved in our governments and help get them to participate in elections, participate in discussions, make informed decisions about where they work, where they invest, where they live, we have to give them information about what it does. So it provides transparency and accountability so that they have confidence in where their tax dollars are working, and then it allows actually the public to analyze data in ways that we may not. I know one thing I struggle with in 311 is I've got all this data, but I don't know how it's relevant. How does someone want to look at it? So by publishing my data openly, then people can consume it and they can look at it the way that they want. So again, those are benefits of getting data out there. It just really aids in the accountability and the transparency. So when you're looking at publishing data, you don't want to reinvent the wheel. One thing that has happened in the 311 space is there's the whole open 311 community. And what the 311 community did was we got together a couple years back, a number of cities across the US and Canada, and we said, here are common elements of doing work in 311. And it's great for putting information into cities, and it's also great for bringing information out. So if you're thinking about sharing data, try and find out if there's a standard. So there's one for 311 data. We're actually working with a bunch of other cities on restaurant data from public health, because if there is a standard out there and you want to publish your data, then it's easier for people to use it, to consume it through a standard practice. So take a look at that, and you'll find that you may find a format that does meet your needs. So one of the things is, okay, so we talk about publishing data, and one of the things that publishing data lets you do is actually take a look at combining data sources and data sets. So what we did is we had a project where we took a look at 311 data and we took a look at crime data. And we tried to put the two of them together on a map. So in the upper left-hand side, what we have is a map of the police districts, and the darker the color indicates a higher percentage or higher number of crimes. And then the circles represent 311 cases. And you can see to some degree that there's a correlation between the number of 311 requests and the crime in a neighborhood. In the one on the bottom right, now we're only looking at graffiti requests. And what you see is not necessarily the same correlation. You've got a larger percentage of graffiti, in the middle of town, and not so much, in the bottom right where you see a higher percentage of crime incidents. So you're not going to be able to necessarily make a decision, but it's going to let you, ask more questions. So without having, the concept of open data and pushing this data out, you're limiting the ability of the public to go ahead and ask these questions and try and come up with solutions themselves. So say you've now decided that you want to go ahead and you want to share your data out there. You've looked at it, it's a good reason. What do you need to do that? And these are what I would say are the key features or parts of sharing data is getting someone to manage it. And then there's a difference where you need to figure out about evangelism. So not everybody inside the city or county or whatever your organization, your government is, are going to have the same feeling about sharing data as you do. And so that's where some degree of evangelism comes in to really help people understand the benefits of sharing data, because the more data that gets shared, then the better opportunity there is to make these connections between the data sets, and you're really going to find relevant data. Some data is going to resonate with your users better than others, and so the more data you get out, then the better chance that some data is going to connect with everyone in your community. The coordination and standardization kind of come together, which is to really work on getting similar data out there so that people can look at it together. In my other example, I had crime by police district, and then I had my 311 data that really didn't overlap in the same area. So I'm trying to compare dissimilar data sets, and it makes it harder. So there's more you can make things the same, the easier it is for the public to use that data. And then assistance is the last thing, is someone's going to have to help people in the departments publish data, because it's new. And until they've done it a little bit, they're going to have a little bit of a harder time understanding how it all works. But there's not a lot. It can be done by a small team or an individual, depending on how far you want to take the program. So going into sharing, I touched on that a little bit, is you have to understand what's relevant, and you kind of have to work on that with your staff. What do you want to share? Where was it? How long? Redaction is key, and I do recommend you have a brief discussion with the city attorney or your county staff. Generally, you can either remove the data that is personal, or you can aggregate and remove the personally identifying information and just kind of do a roll-up summary if it's too hard to redact the individual records. Think of your audience. My first slide where I had 311 in the middle of the public, the department heads, and the decision makers, those are your different audiences, and you want to make sure that when you're publishing data, you're looking at the different possible audiences that would want to consume it. We talked a bit about standards, and one of the reasons why using a standard is great is there are these different events that are called either hackathons or development days, and the reason why these work is because you get a group of targeted individuals that just want to go out and spend a Saturday or a weekend building something. And so if you can get your data out and get it available, then you can take advantage of one of these development days. So we have one in San Francisco that focused on transit. And they used San Francisco transit data, but they also used the data from any other city that conformed to the same transit standards. So you take advantage of shared development, and you get to be part of a big pool of resources if you choose to go into this data sharing environment. All right, so you've decided that it's worth doing and you've got data. The next question is, what do you need to do it? And the main thing I want to say here is it doesn't need to be hard. It doesn't have to be complex. You probably need more than a file cabinet, but there's a lot of options out there. And the 4 that I just want to highlight is you can just use a web page. It's real simple. You can take a file and you can attach it to a web page and you can share data. There are both commercially hosted and community hosted platforms available. So if you don't want to do it on a website, you want to have one step up from that, you can find a number of places that will host the data for you. And then what we did in San Francisco is we just took a web server and we dedicated one web server for the entire city for sharing data, and that was as a platform. So lots of options depending on how you want to do it. But this should not be, the actual platform shouldn't be a limiter to getting data out in front of the public. An example of, again, that most simple level of sharing is a spreadsheet. So we took all of our case data for a 3-month period, we put it into a spreadsheet, and then we put pivot tables on top of it, and then we just share that. So again, a very, very simple ability. If you've got the ability to export data from your ticketing system, it's just easy to go ahead and share that information out. And a simple spreadsheet can provide a lot of information. So going back to that initial freedom of information request, what did we do with this? So I got this, and it actually was the tipping point that got me to actually take all of my interaction data and post it on the web, something I've been thinking about doing for a while. So I went ahead and I responded back to Ray, and I said, hey, you know what, Ray? What I've now done is I've taken and I've posted that data out on a public website. So we use a hosted solution in San Francisco, and the hosted solution lets the user interact with the data directly and view the data on the web. So we think it's a great way of doing it. But for me, I now have monthly data of how many interactions I have through all the different channels. So it's, in summary, what I'm saying is the public data requests are something, if done correctly or done ahead of time, you can really not have to dread that freedom of information request. You can make your data public, staffing needs can match your ambition, and the sharing options can fit your budget. Again, it's something that's worth doing, worth thinking about, and happy to answer any more questions at the end. As Rose said, put your questions in the chat window, and I'm going to pass this conversation over to Steve Carter, who is with Kana, and what he is going to talk about is social CRM, which is listening to this huge world of social media and some of the new technologies that can make that easier for you. So, Steve, go ahead.
Thanks, Andy. Some of the things I'll cover today, as Andy mentioned, is the fact that a lot of the 311 contact centers that we work with that run our Lagan software are experiencing large call volumes, and there's continuing to see the 311 phone number be very popular. But we're also getting into the point of dealing with the fact we're also communicating and listening with citizens in other channels. And one of the more interesting channels that's come up is the social listening prospect of how do you use social media and kind of monitor what citizens are saying around that. And then what do you choose to do about that? And how do you engage your citizens when you're doing through a social channel, not necessarily a voice or email channel that may have been traditionally done? So the idea that we're looking at as we talk to customers, it's the ability to listen across all channels and understand what they're saying. So most people are going to have a good idea of what citizens are doing when they call you on the phone and they talk to you. You've got an idea of what they're inquiring about, the kinds of knowledge searches you're doing, responding to their inquiries. Then they're creating cases, and you see that. But when you when you want to go out and listen and analyze what's being said on the social web, that's a huge amount of data. And what we have is some tools that help you automate that. And think of a automated text analysis capability that could sift through all the email coming in, sift through words being written on your Facebook pages for your city or being written on blog sites with the local newspapers or coming through RSS news feeds. If you take all that text and analyze it and then put it on a dashboard, you begin to organize it and can see by topic, categories, keywords, what the citizens are saying, and not only what they're saying, but what's the sentiment of what they're saying. Are they happy? Or is it not up or down? Are they unhappy about it? Are they mad about it? Are they just confused? What can you see? And you can gauge that sentiment. And then once you understand this information, you can really choose how to engage your citizens. Because I think one of the challenges a lot of customers talk to us about is how many Facebook pages they have or how many city and county staff may be sending tweets out to the public or have their own kind of social media that may be outbound, just trying to understand what are other parts of the city saying to citizens. So that's always a really key thing to try to understand. So it's a little bit more than just monitoring. So if you think about all the possible feeds out there, there's still a large amount of email. There's lots of information that comes through and goes through different applications that the cities use that citizens could take advantage of. But there's a lot of communication going on between citizens. And the idea is that if we can monitor these feeds, and it's not just what's being said to the city, but if we can see what they're saying about the city on other forums, and you get some ideas of topics, maybe even emerging topics that may come through. But the idea is you wrap these things into a dashboard, you give the tools to the staff who can then drill into that, analyze it, and decide what to do. And I'll talk a little bit more about where we think we're going to go beyond listening because we think the idea is to use social media for engagement. So the idea that you could create a case for a department or follow up just like you would if they were making a phone call to 311. But the idea after that is we've got this information in the tool and you can kind of see what's happening, what's the information, and what kind of things are we getting provided. The couple of comments I'll make about this is that the amount of data we're talking about is huge. If you think about what you're listening to, you've got to listen to this data and then you've got to be able to figure out ways to filter it. So if you're monitoring, for example, Facebook, you could look at specific Facebook pages, but then you're really limiting yourself to what's being said. What we have found is in our initial setup, we discovered a lot of comments about cities on websites we might not have thought to look at. A great example of that is TripAdvisor is a site where people post comments about visits and pose questions that they're thinking about going to the city or to this area, and they just ask and people make comments about it. We discovered a lot of people made comments about, is it safe to go there? Is the city clean? What will we encounter? Is it easy to get around? So there were lots of comments going on from maybe a tourism perspective on a TripAdvisor website, which is a heavily used website, but most cities probably don't think to monitor that for how do our citizens think we're doing, or how what's their feedback on our service delivery. But that's an example of as you look at this large amounts of data and analyze it, you may be surprised to find out there are places where there's really good information about sentiment and what citizens are talking about that you wouldn't normally monitor. So the idea here is to go through a process we call listen, analyze, and engage. And the idea is that as that data comes in on dashboards, you see the information, you can choose what to act on, and then eventually it gives you information maybe you can prevent this. One of the key things a lot of our customers get into is what can we do to make sure we're communicating or get some instant feedback that our communications that are going outbound are being understood by the public. So if there's a new recycling program or there's contemplation at council that maybe you want to change garbage pickup delivery dates and you're looking at, due to budget concerns, possibly reducing services in areas, if you talk about that and mention policy, you almost have a real-time barometer on what's the sentiment about that. And it's really nice in that you're going to get the actual sentiment from citizens. You're not going to get just the blogger who spins it a certain way or just the newscaster reporting on what they get. You're really getting that unfiltered, what are the citizens really think? And, think of the ability if every citizen had the chance to walk into City Hall or go to council members or go directly to the elected officials and tell them what they think, well, this gives you the ability to do that. But the idea is that once you kind of know that, you can say, what can we do to prevent this from happening again? And I'll show an example that we worked with one of our customers on their Facebook page. They were analyzing what was being said and chose to respond. And the key idea was to let's update the information to prevent this from happening, make sure we can solve that issue, and make it even clearer to understand so citizens can find the data and react much easier. So what we'll look at is the typical process we have is that once the data has been aggregated and we've got the information there, and it's pretty much real time. I think on about an hourly basis, we'll be pulling data from whatever sources are key. And this is an example of a dashboard screenshot where we've actually drilled into a certain category here, and we're looking at the actual, let's say we're monitoring just recreation. What are the citizens talking about with the city's facilities regarding recreation? We get an idea over a 2-week period, kind of what the volumes are by the columns, the green, yellow, red. The green, yellow, red is exactly what you think. These are good comments versus negative comments. But the process we have on the screen is that you may notice that you can see the breakout by category. You can see by who's authoring it. There's a lot of ways you can see the data, but one of the really neat things about this tool is as you drill down into a certain category like facilities, we actually see the live real-time comments the citizens are making. So we can, from that comment, we can then begin to figure out what are we going to do about it. So one of the things that I'm going to do here is we've noticed a comment right next to the red box there that's a Facebook comment where citizens obviously look at booking a football pitch, practice field, for their team's soccer practice. And there's probably a youth league. Coach isn't quite sure how to do it. Maybe it's a first-timer who's never done it. But he can't find it, couldn't figure out how to do it on the website. So that's an actual comment we picked up that the tool analyzed and said this is negative sentiment. And from this point, we can choose what are we going to do about it. So from the listening perspective, we saw what was being said about facilities. The tool brought in the comments that we viewed are there, and we've chosen to focus on, let's look at the ones that are negative sentiment. But from that one, we can now say, what are we going to do? And this is where I want to kind of illustrate what we think the power of this tool is going to be. It's not just for the listening and showing you the comment and what's being said, but it's how do we want to act and what do we want to do to engage and respond. In this case, you can choose to create a case, create knowledge entries. Maybe you want to do all of the above. But the example is we want to basically have an agent in the, queue this comment up to be responded to just like if they had called the call center. So what we're looking at now is when we choose to engage, what we're going to be doing in the future is we're going to do more to tie the Lagan interaction tracking system into the social monitoring. So the ability here says, let's track not only we got a comment on social media, but let's track what we say. Let's track what we respond to. We can draft the text that we're going to send out. And in some cases, we can draft the text within these tools and maybe not have to log into Facebook or go out to Twitter. We can have the tool. We can generate and submit the request directly from the desktop. That avoids maybe the situation of you having to put these social media tools in your agent's hands and worry about are they browsing on for personal reasons and other things. But if you just don't want to have access to it, we can let the tool do that. This is a good example of obviously people are on the website not sure what to do. So we've drafted the reply text that's going to be posted to Facebook. We've indicated to the knowledge base team that maybe we need to make it clearer on the process for how you book these fields to reserve them for practices. Let's make a note to the knowledge administrators and an article about what we should say, and we capture that. So the idea is that the tools not only tell us what's going on and what the citizens are saying, but now when we engage and we choose to respond, we're going to track that response. And we're going to be able to see what was said. And basically we can create an interaction record and have a complete record of what happened through this. And now we've got whatever the agent said in the postings. Instead of someone logging onto a Facebook page and posting it and we don't know what they said, we actually have that as part of the interaction record now. We can see that. So what we see back on the council's page is that for Facebook, that comment that was posted actually gets a reply. And I've zoomed in a little bit here for you to be able to see that reply. But that text that the agent drafted as part of the comment to say, you know, let's post this and put that information up there, has now been indicated, was replied, added to the Facebook page. Now that citizen sees that information, as well as a tiny URL web link that may take them right to where they can do it on the website. So that's a great example of how we can take the listening part of the process and then actually pull it in and make something happen out of this, but have a record tracked, an interaction we recorded, and we've used social media to respond just as if they had called the call center. So that's a pretty good summary overview of some of the new tools we'll have to look at the channel around social media. The key word thing here is channels. We believe that with this kind of a tool, you can listen across multiple channels so that you can have these tools reading all your inbound email. You can have these tools just looking at social or just focusing on certain keywords. If you've got comment areas on your websites where citizens can leave comments and posts and other things like that, it can analyze that. And the key goal is that, again, the tool can do the analyzation for you without having to dedicate staff to go out and browse and read and see what's there. And then you can have your staff just focus on the activities, the sentiment that appears to be negative, or is a high enough priority you want to react to it and respond to it. If you have any questions about that, you can see my information and send the questions into Rose. With that, I'm going to turn it over to the next group, Neil Evans and Heather from the Toronto 311, who are going to talk about the knowledge base. Neil?
Thanks, Steve. It's just Heather this morning, not Neil. Neil's not here with me today.
All right.
So, buddy, and it's nice to have everybody here. I'm going to talk about the knowledge base at 311 and how we use it. And so just to give you a brief agenda of what we're going to talk about, just an intro of our knowledge base, what we use it for, how we use it, how we use the knowledge base, our agents use it, and how we push that out to our citizens for them to use, some of the challenges that we face right now, and some of the future vision and direction that we're planning on doing within the next year or two. So here at 311 Toronto, about 78% of all of our calls, all of our contacts are general inquiry. So we use our knowledge base for a large majority of every time someone contacts with us, whether it's over the phone, via email, whatnot. Just to give you a little idea of what we did when we built our knowledge base, we actually had some of our research analysts excuse me, go out and spend about 2 years visiting with all of our divisions, our special purpose bodies, listening to what people were actually calling about. And what a lot of people do is they take about, you know, the most of their frequently asked questions and they put it into their knowledge base. And what we tried to do was to expand on that and not just put in what people are frequently calling about, but majority of information that we could have across the city. So anything that people are going to call the city about, we'd like to have that in our knowledge base or at least have some kind of a link out to it. So we expanded the use of how we're looking at knowledge. And as a result, unlike a lot of other clients who use knowledge, they tend to use it from a smaller perspective, and we really, you know, broke the bounds on how we were going to use knowledge. So, and the purpose for us was going to be not just so we could use it from a 311 contact center perspective, but really so that, you know, the people in the city, our citizens, as well as all the people who work for the city, could use our knowledge base and have consistent information about services that are provided in the city. One of the other things that we do is we use a Wikipedia that we developed just for our short-term information. Things that are going to be changing rapidly. You know, there's a major water main break and it's impacting people's basements are flooding, things like that. There's a garbage truck that's broken down and therefore garbage is going to be delayed. Those kinds of short-term information we maintain on our Wikipedia. So just to give you an idea of some of the information that's in our knowledge base, we have about 27,000 solutions, and prior to us, we used a Lagan product, and I believe most of their clients were using about 400 or 500 solutions at the time. So when I said we really broke the bounds, we went from about 400 to about 27,000, so we really broke the bounds. The solutions are really what the questions that questions and answers that people are going to be calling us about, and links out, as well as our contact information. So, for example, if we have to transfer a call or provide information about a person who's responsible for that piece of work, we also use that to link out to all of our contacts. The way our information is organized, we have about 800 subject matter experts. So at 311 Toronto, we don't author any content. We have subject matter experts, the 800 of them, who are responsible for every piece of content that goes into our knowledge base, and they are that authoritative source. So we have the divisions identify those people, and they're responsible for all the information that goes in there. So we make sure that the information that's in there is accurate and up to date. We break, unlike a lot of groups, they break down their knowledge into various communities, and what we did, and one of the struggles that we find is we try to keep all of our information into one main community, and then we have some smaller communities for other items. And by doing that, one of the pressures it puts on us is that, it's a large volume of data, and if you're going to be indexing and whatnot, it's going to end up causing you, your index times are going to be longer and things like that. So it does, having it in one community does cause us some problems, and it's one of the things that we're going to talk about a little bit later about how we're going to, look at that as an issue and one of the challenges that we face and one of the things we can do about it. We also use the communities for things like bulletins, events that are going on in the city, meetings, so that our CSRs can find this information. Our city, we've broken down into 44 city divisions, so we've included information for all of those divisions, as well as we have what we call our special purpose bodies, so agencies, boards, commissions, things like TTC, our Toronto Police, things like that. We also have information in our knowledge base from federal, provincial governments. So when people call us, they generally don't care what level of government it is. They just see us all as one organization. So we want to be able to provide information on our federal, provincial, and we do it in a way so that we're not duplicating information from everyone else. We don't want to just have, all the information that the feds are putting in. We don't want to just duplicate all that information. So what we tend to do is put in some of the the important points, the overall summary type thing, so that it's easier for our agents, and then we link out to any additional information if they want to be able to, get more information about that and whatnot. We also put information in about some of our nonprofits within the city. And one of the bonuses about doing it this way is that it gives us an opportunity to be able to have that bird's eye view. So because information is all coming to us from various divisions and groups, we can look at that information and make sure that it's consistent and people are not saying different things from, Toronto Water is not saying one thing and Toronto Public Health is saying something else about the same topic because they share components of that information. So in that way, we get an idea of, everything that people are saying and making sure it's all consistent across. This is just an idea. I wanted to show you some of the communities that we have. And one of the things that I wanted to point out here is we included our policies and procedures into one of our communities, and we make sure that that's available only to our CSRs. And it's information if they want to know about any type of policy for anything, even things like how to use the phone, any of those kinds of useful information to our CSRs. We just put all of that in one policy and procedure. And what we found was really helpful about a lot of this is by doing our knowledge like this, now information that's in people's heads or is on a piece of paper somewhere, we don't have that environment anymore. We have everything in our knowledge base that people can use to be able to access information. Even, like I said, how to use the phone. If there's, a procedure on logging in and whatnot, then we have that in our knowledge base. The other piece at the bottom where you see the new is what we call our Knowledge Plus. So in the event of, this year we faced the possibility that there may have been a labor disruption. Thankfully, we avoided that. There was no labor disruption. But what we did was we created this Knowledge Plus community. And what we could have done was rather than go in and change all of our 27,000 solutions, we created a new community where people could go and look at the changes, the impacts that were going to happen as a result of a labor disruption. And then we wouldn't have had to go and change all 27,000 solutions. So we could say, for example, garbage will be impacted as a result of a labor disruption. These are the changes, and then refer them to the pages for things that were not going to be impacted. And this was great for us because then we could train staff who were going to be coming in, redeployed staff and whatnot, and it was an excellent opportunity for us to take advantage of the knowledge base. So the way we have our knowledge base organized is we have lag and knowledge that our CSRs use. We also do static HTML pages that we connect to a Google appliance for search, and then we use that as our backup. We also use the Google appliance on our intranet. So like I said, all the people, the city staff, the mayor, councilors, all have access to our knowledge base, so we all have one consistent story about the city. And then we also put it out on our website so that the public has access to all of our information. So this way, if they have general inquiry, they don't necessarily have to call us. They can go on our website and see our knowledge base. With our maintenance and updates, we make sure that every piece of information that's in there goes out at least once a year at a minimum to be reviewed. And all of the changes, like I said, have a subject matter expert, and then they're all approved before anything goes in and any changes are made. And then any kind of short-term information, whatnot, can be reviewed as needed. They just send it to us, and we just update it as required. This is just an idea of our online knowledge base. You see, this is our website. You can see where people can go, connect to us. They can search our knowledge base. And we also try to put in, the most frequently asked questions. We try to circulate that on our, where we see the people are asking, so that we know what people are asking us about. Some of the challenges that we face, one is ensuring that CSRs use the knowledge base. So for example, on the night of the elections, we had, 10,000 calls, 5,000 more than usual, and the majority of those were about the election. What time's the poll close? But the CSR had been asked that question numerous times on the night of the election, so they weren't necessarily going to the knowledge base every single time. So it causes us issues with, being able to keep track for a reporting perspective on how many calls we received for the election. We have our own editor that we use. We don't use the login editor. And we had some challenges with that, so that's going to be one of the things that we're working on this year, is having an editor that meets all of our needs so that our agents, sometimes we're making 600 changes a day. So we want to have something that's very flexible that we can use so that it meets all of our needs for making those 600 changes a day. And like I said earlier about the reporting on the general inquiry, if your CSRs are not able to use it, and then you have difficulty being able to report out on what people are calling you about. And we're a contact center, and one of the things that people are asking us, the mayor, councilors, whatnot, are what are people calling us about? The other piece one of the other challenges that we face is having one source of information. We have websites, we have our knowledge base, we use our wiki for short-term information, but we want to make sure that all the information that we share is going to be consistent regardless of where people go within the city or, citizens go on our websites, so they can get one source of information. So just some future directions for what we're going to be doing. One of the first things we're going to be doing is looking at one source of information. So we're going to be upgrading Login into the CANA product, into the new SEM knowledge, and we're also going to be linking that to what we use for our web content information. And our web content information, we use OpenText, which used to be known as Vignette, now it's OpenText. And we're going to be doing an integration between our CANA and our web content so that it's one source, and where you can make an update or whatnot in either place, and you will be able to see it in that one source of information. So whether the public goes on our website or a city staff person goes on our website or uses our knowledge base, it all has one source of information, all linked together, all integrated, and it's one update for all those 800 people that are making our updates all the time. Some other things that we're going to be doing is looking at some of our usability. When we offer the Google appliance, it gives you, Google gives you some nice type ahead features, did you mean, whatnot. We're looking at some of those components to be able to add to our knowledge base, as well as some pictures, glossary, those kinds of things. Those are the things we're working on now so that we can improve the customer experience when they use our knowledge base. And then, like I said earlier, being able to access meaningful reports. We're going to be turning on our soft phone within Login and connecting our agents to what kinds of things people are asking us about, as well as what things people are asking for about on the web. So whether you call us and our CSRs look for that information, or whether you go on our website and you access that information, or a city staff person accesses that information on a website, we'll be able to pull all that into our business intelligence reporting and be able to have one true meaningful report. So it tells the story of, the voice of the customer, what people are really asking us about. Okay, so now I'm going to pass it over to Scott Friends from Oracle, and he's going to be talking about delivering a comprehensive citizen experience with 3-on-1. I think we're going to be taking up any questions at the end, so thank you, everybody, for listening and participating. And have a nice day.
I appreciate it very much, and we're going to have to make up some time here, so I'm going to quickly go through really delivering a comprehensive citizen experience with 3-1-1 and why it matters to public sector and what the challenge is and how we do it. This is just our safe harbor statement. And, what is customer experience? It's all those services for supplying goods capabilities over the duration of a relationship with a supplier. In this case, the government is a supplier. And why does that matter? It matters to government because we've taken polls, we've looked and assessed over time what the responsiveness to our citizens is, and this is a poll that was done many years ago that tells you almost less than 50% are satisfied with government services. Now that's improved dramatically with the capabilities and technology today. So it's evolved, from a single channel where e-government has lagged a little bit behind e-commerce in the commercial world, but the private sector's version of this obviously is conducting business electronically, and now government is much enabled to do that, as you've seen in both from Andy's presentations and Heather's, and the experience and the knowledge that we're gaining from these resources. But the demands the citizen is making on our capability are from all channels, from the office all the way face-to-face to mobility now, to the social networks that Steve talked about, and beyond that now, in trying to formalize much better reaction to a citizen's request for service and benefits that they're dialing into or coming into an office still today. And really, ultimately, what we need to deliver is a dynamic, personalized, immersive experience that the citizen engages through preferred channels. And obviously, everyone would like to be providing good capabilities. It takes time to do that. And the challenge is how can we engage these people and when we have separate goals and motivations across different channels. And this compounds the issues for providing key performance indicators and incentives. So therefore, our citizen experience when they dial in or when they come into a facility or when they're on their mobile phones and they can't find the information they need, it contributes to, perhaps political negativism with the jurisdiction that's providing that service. So how do we provide better capability for, in some instances, where you can see here that the operational silos, jobs are lost and careers could be ruined when a government agency fails to meet its mission. If a citizen doesn't receive the services they need at the right time and place, it could be a critical situation, and so for instance, food and nutrition assistance. So we have to better serve that capability, and this is an example of a citizen life cycle, not unlike a customer life cycle. It's providing services anytime, anywhere, in a seamless, personal way. Very much indicative of what the cities are obviously trying to do with 311 and states with 1-800 services and providing comprehensive citizen experience. So Oracle is providing this both with a complete solution and a platform for ideation by our partners. A quick example of this is in New York City, where they rely on our 311 system from a customer experience standpoint because the citizen can actually track their request and find out what the result was, and the statistics that the mayor utilizes, you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, to report on those calls obviously contributes to key performance within the city council members' districts and across the board as far as resolving issues within the process within the agency. They've been very successful at really pinpointing issues across citywide. And in doing that, obviously there are ways to obtaining a return on investment with 311 by fully integrating fully configurable multi-organization security, multi-department workflow capabilities, integrated case management, extensive browser configurations, integrated performance management, as I mentioned New York does. In Montgomery County, I'll give one last example of ways that they were able to address their entire environment by changing process, providing a single point of contact, being better responsive, and reducing 911 calls. They receive actual service requests, and I'll give a quick example of their self-service web portal from a county-wide web. The Internet can provide these citizens with online website self-help options, customer service and account information, or they can place service requests and orders through various channels of communications, chat or callback requests. They can provide departments with the ability to gain insight into all the citizen Internet interactions. So finding suggested responses using partial information entered by requester can also be posted within the portal itself. The call taker can view citizen interaction history online, and they can create an update request from this web portal capability. So this gives an idea of how we are providing citizen experience and overcoming the objectives, or really meeting the objectives of cities, counties, and states, and in the challenge of providing great citizen experience. And with that, I will now turn over to Eva Liggins from the government of the District of Columbia.
Thank you. Due to our time, I'm just going to talk from basically one slide that sort of summarizes some very common customer service practices no matter the industry. I was formerly with Dallas 311 as the Assistant Director. I'm now the Director of Customer Service for the D.C. Office of Tax and Revenue. But there are some things that are common to every industry that provides service. And this is a slide I'm going to focus on. The rest of the presentation will be available online. Can you hear me now? Here are some things that are common that the customers say that create good customer service experiences. Smiles. How important is that you can hear a smile in someone's voice, whether it's over the phone, whether it's through walk-in, but customers, no matter the industry, say that that's very important. Automated systems, as we know, are very important to us assisting our customers, but in many cases, people still want to talk to humans. They want real people. If you design your automated systems, be sure that you design them so that customers can use them with ease. Respect for the customer's time. Reliability. Can your customer count on you no matter the industry? Are you accountable? Do you take ownership of the issue once you get the issue? When you make a mistake, and mistakes do occur, but are you willing to admit that mistake? And even after you've made the mistake, are you quick to recover and make the correction when the mistakes are made? And that is certainly critical in all industries. And here in the tax industry, as you can imagine, that's extremely critical that we make sure that we recover from the mistakes that we make. No excuses. Knowledgeable employees. There's nothing worse than talking to an employee who really does not have knowledge of their jobs, of the industry, how to get things done. Empathy. Put yourself in the customer's shoes. Flexibility. There's no one size that fits all. And yet sometimes we want to tell the customer about policy, about statutes, about all of the things that we do internally, and the customer really wants you to resolve their issue. Are we courteous? And do we have, and this one I think is very important, no matter the industry that you're in, do you have a genuine desire to make the customer happy and make the experience memorable? Do you thank the customer for their business? One of the things that I've communicated to my team is that even though we're in the tax business and we're the only tax game in town, people have to do business with us. How we provide service may impact whether or not people continue to live in the district or to do business in the District of Columbia. And are you friendly in terms of your greeting? Again, these are all things, there are a lot of other slides, don't have time to go through, but these are some very common things that are common to all customer service organizations if you want to deliver exceptional customer service as your goal. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Rose.
Thank you, Eva. We had such great information to share today. So again, this information, the presentations, will be posted on the 311 Synergy Group LinkedIn site. And we're going to cover off on just a couple of questions. If we didn't get to your question, we will ask and answer the question on LinkedIn. So again, if you'll go there, there's a discussion tab, and we'll get those questions answered on the discussion. But first, I'm going to ask one of our, let's see, Lisa, are the panelists unmuted?
I can unmute them as you let me know which one you need to speak to.
Okay, Esther, could you take this first question, please? Do you see city call centers moving away from 24-hour call centers as a cost-saving measure in the tight budget times?
Okay, well, I can share our experience in Albuquerque. We were 24/7, and in 2010, because of the budget situation, we did reduce our hours. The analysis that we did showed that only 2% of our call volume came in after 9 p.m. and before 6 a.m., and most of those calls were actually non-emergency police calls that we don't typically handle, or they were from lonely people. So we did adjust our hours, and we were able to save $500,000 in salary by closing at 9 p.m. and reopening again at 6 a.m. Monday through Saturday, and on Sunday we handle abbreviated call types. So we're on an abbreviated schedule. So I do see call centers, if you're really analyzing your data, I think you're going to find it's very important to take a look at, do you really need to be there? And because if you're not serving a purpose or bringing value, then you're not being fiscally prudent with taxpayer money.
So the next one, Scott, I'm going to ask you if you'll answer this question. I know that you partnered with AT&T and did a presentation at the 311 Synergy Group. We have a question about moving call centers back to the USA. What's the advantages and disadvantages of using a public-private partnership? Scott, could you take that one?
Yes, I will. I think, not sure it's a disadvantage or an advantage, but I think probably the biggest issue with that is the compliance and governance in working through that in a public-private partnership. If it's strictly an outsourcing contract, that makes a huge difference rather than a public-private partnership. An experience that we've had is it takes much longer, which obviously provides more expense from a county or a city standpoint in trying to come to a contractual agreement with one of those centers. I'm not sure that a commercial call center is any better than a government call center, because the business process and the key performance indicators are matched up very similarly. So I experience both sides, both commercial walkthroughs and public sector walkthroughs in their equivalent call centers from business process and execution standpoint. So I'm not sure. And if cost is the real advantage, that's obviously something that the government budget will have to make a decision on.
Thank you, Scott. We have one additional question that I'll be posting on LinkedIn, but it's also a question that is a good example of what we'll be doing in the webinars that are coming up in the coming months. The webinars are scheduled for the fourth Wednesday of every month, and there'll be interactive best practice sessions. So for instance, we have a question here: do you feel that the cost per call is a good measure of a call center? So for example, someone would ask that question in the webinar, and then the others that are dialed in will be able to reply to that question. So it will be more roundtable discussions, more experiences from other cities and sponsors that have dialed in. So to conclude this webinar today, I'd like to thank our sponsors again, AT&T, Oracle, and Kana, for participating with us not only at the 311 Synergy Group meeting, but for participating in this webinar today. And the presentations will be posted on LinkedIn. And the question that we have about cost per call, we'll also post that as a discussion item. And thank you very much for participating, for dialing in. Thanks to all of our panelists. They had great information to share. And we look forward to all of you dialing in next month, the fourth Wednesday of the month, and we'll continue interactive roundtable discussions. Thank you.